What's up, gentlemen? This is Rising Phoenix Podcast about how to rise up after your divorce. I'm your host, divorce coach, Michael Rhodes. Let's get into it. Joining me today is Michelle Farris. Michelle, let's just jump right into it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Great. Thanks for having me. So I'm a psychotherapist in San Jose, California, and I specialize in codependency and anger management. And for me, this work is really important because I do it as well. I'm definitely, I walk my talk because I really, really believe that if you are shopping for a therapist, you need to have somebody who is actually doing their own work. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of mumbo jumbo, and it's not as effective because they don't have the same experience. So for me, that's a huge value in my work.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I agree. I think when guys are seeking out someone to help them, I think it's especially, I don't know, but especially, but for divorce for sure, it's always nice
Yeah.
if you have someone that's also been through it. It's not necessary,
Hmm.
but certainly you want to have a therapist that's connected with what they're doing, and it
Yeah.
sounds like you are. So, as
Hmm.
I like to do on this podcast, I like to define things, and we are going to talk about anger today. So, as silly as it may sound, what is anger?
Well, anger, actually, I think that's a good question because everybody assumes anger is bad,
Mm.
right? We should avoid it. That means it's rage. That means it's abuse. That means people, don't have any control. And really, anger is an intense feeling that helps us know when our boundaries are being crossed.
Mm.
So when I get angry, I automatically know something in my environment is not okay. Somebody may have said something, did something. Maybe I had a random thought that got me angry, whatever, but something happened that caused me to react. And we're not bad or wrong for it. That's just anger is literally that warning flag that says, hey, 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 pay attention because something important is happening. And that's what I really want to convey to your listeners is that, anger is, if you can pay attention to it and see the value in it, you're going to be able to manage it.
Yeah, well, and I think you're right that I think it's definitely viewed in a negative way, and even by myself, to be honest,
Sure.
because I think so. As I was saying before we jumped on, as someone who I run a Facebook support group for men going through divorce, and there's 7,000 men in there, and I have
Mm,
seen all kinds of angry men, and I was angry when my ex-wife first left, and so I
yeah.
always kind of feel like anger is a weakness because it
Mm-hmm.
leads to destruction, for lack of a
Uh-huh.
better description. So it sounds like it's not necessarily the case that anger can be okay or even maybe good. I'll let you
Mm-hmm.
make that determination. But often what it leads to is not that. And so I guess
Correct.
maybe let's start with what is a healthy way to express anger?
So when anger's healthy, you're expressing how you feel. I'm upset when this happens, right? When you said this last night, when you didn't respond to my text, I'm angry. Instead, in unhealthy anger, it's all about blaming the other person for our reality. You made me mad. You're doing X, Y, and Z and treating me like crap. That's where it's such a simple thing, but it's really the focus. If we can focus on us and what we're feeling, we're going to be 10 times more healthy than when we say what you're doing, because that's the match that lights the other person up to go, wait a minute, I'm not doing that. And then you're in a back and forth tug of war.
Yeah, I mean that sounds so familiar.
Oh, yeah, we've all done it.
I was checking out your website and I noticed that you said or it says that women also struggle with anger because they feel like it's not attractive. But
Mhm.
um, I was kind of surprised by that. But what I'm not surprised by is how much men lean on it. Um,
Mm.
why is there such a and again, maybe some of these questions are silly, but why is there such a difference in how men and women express their anger typically,
Well,
generally?
I think when we look at little boys and little girls will be boys when they're angry. There's a lot more permission, and we almost expect boys to have anger. Whereas with girls, it's shh, be
Right.
quiet, be nice,
Right.
follow the program. So the socialization aspect is
Mm.
so different. And I think that's why, and now sometimes men can be, cultured that way to be quiet, shut up, don't
Sure.
have your feelings for sure. But women's anger tends to be a little more passive aggressive,
Mm.
not all the time, but
Sure.
they're going to stuff it more and then it's going to leak out later because that initial
Mm.
response is, I can't have that feeling. Somebody's going to be upset at me. So I have to suck it up.
Is that
But
why is that why resentment so
Mhm.
in this divorce space, the
Yeah.
majority of divorces are filed by
Yeah.
women.
Yes.
Is it because partially I just feel like I just stumbled onto some kind of great fucking discovery here. Which I'm sure I didn't, but it feels like it to me. Um, is that why women eventually do file over so like in my case, so we were together 15
Mhm.
years and
Mhm.
year of 13, almost 13 of the marriage is when she was like, I'm done, and left and all
Uh-huh.
that stuff. So is that because she repressed her anger, which led to a buildup of a resentment over the year? And I know I'm generalizing, and you don't know her, and you don't know
Well,
me, and
do
all
you
these kinds of
think that was
things.
like, is that what you saw? Like or was she honest and said, hey, I'm struggling, the marriage isn't working for me, and gave you that hint?
No,
Yeah.
well, not to me. Now she may have a different answer to that, but I will say
Uh-huh.
that over the
Yeah.
years,
Hmm.
um, that I will say that at the end there was stuff that was brought up from years ago, and I know there's all these
Yeah.
jokes about
Yeah.
how women can bring up things that
Oh, yeah. We
women
have
make
a
the best.
memory.
Yeah,
Hmm.
they make the best archaeologists. They can really dig up stuff from the past or whatever the hell it is, which is
Yeah.
kind of funny. But is that the case? Is that's because they don't know how to,
Hmm.
and I'm not
Hmm.
knocking them, whatever, just reality. They don't know how to deal
Yeah.
with their anger. It becomes resentment over a period of time.
Yes, and I think that's an equal opportunity problem with men too, but I agree. I think a lot of women sometimes they say, "Hey, I'm unhappy. I'm waving the red flag." And then they don't get heard until they finally leave. But I think your scenario can work too, where they don't say anything and they're stewing over and over for years and years and years until they finally break and say, I'm out. And the sad part is that they didn't give the marriage a chance necessarily if they didn't really include their partner in their process of frustration or resentment.
Yeah, I mean, I struggle with this a lot in terms of because it ultimately it kind of doesn't matter because it's over, right? And you have to move forward. But I do think that in order to prevent it from happening again, should I hit the fucking lottery and find somebody else because it feels like it's
You
impossible.
can, you
It's
can.
been 4.5 years, hasn't been so well. But anyway, I digress. So sometimes I go, well, she didn't bring it up, but
Uh-huh.
and not because I want to beat myself up, but just because I want to be realistic. And I do think that that's still part of it. But I do wonder, did I hold the space necessary to
Mhm.
allow her to express herself? And I don't know that I did.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's interesting that how there becomes a breaking point, and I guess everyone's different. I guess everyone has this for different things in life, stresses,
Hmm.
I guess. But like, what and I know this is another maybe not silly but impossible question to answer. It fascinates me how people get to a breaking point, and it's like, why didn't
Hmm.
you say something before that point? Like, it's almost like people get to a point where they go, this is enough, but it's too late for them. Like, in other words, like
Hmm.
they are like, I'm done, and here's why. But and if they just would have expressed it months before, years even, we wouldn't get to that
Yeah.
point. Um,
Well, I think to that point, though, the problem is because I've worked with so many women who have said, hey, I'm
yeah,
unhappy. And the problem is that sometimes we don't hear it
yeah,
because we don't want to hear it. It doesn't
yeah,
compute and it doesn't make the other person bad or wrong. It's just, they just don't hear it.
yeah.
And then
Yeah,
sometimes the woman actually moves out and then they're like, holy shit.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I do think
Now she really meant it.
I do think that men, I'm not a spokesperson, but I do think that men really need to be grabbed a hold of and shaken and said and really like, listen,
Sometimes. Yeah.
this is where I'm at. And I wonder, this leads me back to kind of anger. I wonder if it is that is because we're so bad with our emotions that we just avoid it. And I think
Mhm.
anger allows us to do that as well. So bringing it back to anger, I think
Yeah.
that's why men lean heavily onto anger, because it everything can become anger for a man. And I'm sure women aren't that much
Mhm.
different, but
Yeah.
embarrassment,
Mhm.
frustration,
Right.
hurts the big
Right.
one, all those things. I
Yeah.
think for men it becomes anger. Is that something that you typically see, that it's really not um so much anger, it's the underneath stuff?
Yeah, they shut off because let's face it, to have a healthy relationship of any kind, you have to really have a certain set of skills. You have to have awareness. You have to have accountability. You
Hmm.
have to be willing to admit your faults and say, yeah, this is my weak area.
Yeah.
But when we don't know how to do that, and if women, sometimes women can have really, and men can too, but we can have that Prince Charming, you're supposed to fill me up
Yeah.
mentality, which is totally not fair because
Yeah.
no one person can do that.
Right.
But we have so many issues like that running around. Plus, the man may be saying, I'm not going there because
Right.
I don't know how to navigate that.
Yeah.
And that's fair. That's
Yeah.
why people tend to have to hit a bottom to go to therapy. They don't go to therapy on the first problem, they go to therapy on almost the last problem
Mm.
because they don't see it as a good thing. They see it as a weakness, which is
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree. And I think it is sad. I mean, so much of this stuff seems preventable. Like these
I know,
relationship
right.
issues seem preventable. One of the things that always sort of fascinates me is the ratio. And I think I
Mhm.
ask many therapists this, but in terms of the people that you see and deal with, are you seeing more women or more men? I'm going to guess women, but I don't know.
For anger, it's more men.
Mm,
For codependency, people pleasing, not setting boundaries, lack of self, it tends to be more women, but I do have men who struggle with codependency too,
sure.
because, you know, it's that familiar, I'm going to stuff it and then it's going to leak out.
Yeah. How do you, if someone, uh, if for men, when they're coming to you,
Mhm.
is it typically with anger issues
Yeah.
specifically, is that something that they're court ordered to do, or do they like realize like
Yeah.
I just almost beat the shit out of somebody due to road rage and I need to see you?
No. I mean, I used to teach the 52-week anger management class required by the court.
Mm,
I get some of those calls, but I redirect them because I don't teach that anymore.
yeah.
But honestly, the calls I get are from normal guys that call
Mm,
me up and say, you know what? I feel bad. I'm yelling at my wife. She told me I need help, or I'm yelling at my kids.
yeah.
So, I mean, the anger is such a common issue. And it's
Mm,
funny because in my Calming Anger 4-week Zoom class, one of the first questions I get asked before people sign up is, well, is this class because people are violent? And I say, you know what? Ironically, I've run this class since the pandemic and I have yet one person to be violent.
mm.
All of them are normal, everyday people that just have trouble expressing or containing their emotion.
So okay, so let's maybe dive into what to do then.
Yeah.
Let's say you're an
Yep.
angry dude, sometimes, a little bit here and there, and you don't know what to do. And I want to
Yeah.
be as specific as I can, because this happens to
Sure.
me a lot. I don't know that it's anger more in so that I don't really fly off the handle so much anymore. I really have worked on myself a lot, but I still have
Sounds like
these
it.
moments where I get very frustrated by my children. I have two daughters. I
Yep.
love them dearly, but they drive me fucking crazy because that's what kids do, and I get that. But
Yeah.
sometimes I get, and sometimes it's lack of sleep, it's work, it's stress, it's all these things, and I get very irritable. How the
Yes.
hell do I deal with that? Because I don't have a partner to express it to. I have friends, of course, but I don't have a
Right.
partner. I don't have a significant other. I only have my kids. Like when I am in a agitated, we'll call it state, how do I get out of that? How do I stop being agitated?
So one, you identify it, right? Okay, I'm agitated. And usually what I have people do is rate it from 1 to 10.
Mm,
1 is you're good. 3, 4, you're like, yeah, I'm starting to get annoyed, but I'm okay. So the danger is people tend to ignore it when it's at a lower level.
mm,
Catch it at a lower level. I'm annoyed today. I'm pissy. I'm whatever.
right.
And then you got to find what are some concrete things you can do to take a walk, call a friend and bitch to somebody about how
Mm.
hard it is to be a single dad, because that's important.
No, sure
What
is.
can you do to actually share it? And like sometimes what I used to do is I'd go in the garage and I
Mm,
would say the uncensored version
mm.
because I couldn't say it in my house because
Yeah,
it wouldn't be nice. But
sure.
I knew I'm like, I got to say it somewhere, or I'd get in my car and take a drive and scream in my
Mm.
car.
Hmm.
So sometimes we literally just have to say what we need to say without censoring it.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's support, sometimes it's exercise, but I don't recommend avoiding the feeling because sometimes people will say, well, I just listened to a podcast and then I just forgot about it. Well, that's
Mm.
great if it calms you down, but that same feeling is going to come up again because you didn't get to the source. So
Mm.
if you can get to this and writing, I've done a lot of journaling when I'm angry because man, some powerful stuff comes out. You just
Oh
have to
yeah.
be willing not to judge yourself for it because it's what we all do. We have that inner voice that's pretty negative
Yeah.
that we need to have like a feelings dump on paper.
Yeah. So let's hone in on that. You talked about getting to the source. What does that mean
Yeah.
exactly? Like what
Mhm.
specifically?
So I mean, getting to the original trigger. So years ago, I dated someone who was chronically late, drove me nuts.
Hmm.
Why it drove me nuts was because I was saying to myself, he doesn't care about me enough to be on time. And I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. But then the other thing I realized was, well, my dad was a captain of a cargo ship. He was gone 6 months at a time my whole life. So
Mm.
when he's late, I mean, I was like, whoop, I want to see my dad. So when I put that together, one, the belief that I'm not okay because this person's late, and it actually did not mean that at all.
Yeah.
And two, the childhood trigger of, yeah, I was left a lot without
Mm.
being with my dad.
Yeah.
So it's a sore spot. That helped me claim the trigger. So
Mm.
when somebody's late, I don't take it as personally because I'm like, well, you know what? That's my sore spot. And being late doesn't mean what I think it means to that other person.
So you
So you
really
want
have
to
to,
try to dissect it.
yeah, you really have to sort of be conscious. You have to take the time, right, to try and ask
Yeah.
these questions like
Yeah.
what is the source? What is really going on?
Right.
Um, do you do that? Do you recommend? I mean, I think probably you would as a therapist, but do you recommend this is some work that you would do with a therapist, right?
Yeah. I mean, I have some online products as well that walks you through, like I have a resentment journal that will really target leaving getting rid of resentment. But it's
Interesting.
that piece of what's my part? How can I view this differently? Because when we're angry, we're almost always in negative assumption.
Hmm.
That other person isn't going to respect me. That other person isn't going to allow me to say no. That other person is judging me. Whatever we think, we have to confront that, you know what? We're making that stuff up. That's not necessarily what the other person means. And so if you're angry in a relationship, go back to your partner and say, you know what? I think you just said I was stupid. Even though you didn't say it, I felt it. And then the other person can go, no, I didn't mean that at all. I'm just really frustrated that you're not listening to me. So you check out that negative assumption instead of saying, you're saying I'm stupid.
Okay, so that's awesome. That's gold. That leads me to think of a listener. I'll call him a friend of mine, Pete. Shout out to Pete. Pete has, and I'm not saying anything out of line here. I don't think
Yeah.
Pete. Yeah, you can message me if you think so, but I don't think so. Pete, every month, has to write an alimony check, and that makes Pete very
Mm,
angry. And
yeah.
um,
Yeah.
how does he approach that in a way to dissolve the anger, or can he? Is it just something you got to go, yeah, this is going to piss me off every time? Like, how does he handle that? Because he can't go to her and say, hey, could you stop
Right.
these payments?
Right.
That would be perfect, but he can't do that. So what is his strategy
Right.
around that?
Well, I'd be asking him, how is he holding that? Like, I'm being taken advantage of. This is too much money. She left me anyway. Like there's probably a lot of negative
Well,
stuff, which some are valid, let's face it,
sure,
right? Sometimes the men do get screwed in divorce. Hate to say it,
sure,
but sometimes that does happen.
absolutely.
So it's like, can you dig a little deeper in what is bothering you about that alimony check? Because if we can make that neutral, this is just part of what happens in divorce. It
Mm,
sucks, but this is, you know, or it might be something where he feels like, you know what, I am paying too much. I need this reevaluated, or I need some
mm,
legal help because
sure.
I don't feel like this is fair and I might have a leg to stand on. So that anger might be the source for him to possibly have it reduced. We don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. So it can be, it's a guide then. It can be a
Yes.
fuel to make a change,
Yes.
either an actual
Absolutely.
change or a change in how you see it or interpret it, right?
Right. And it's okay to be mad that you're writing an alimony check, but don't stay there. Like, can you process that? Can you go to a divorce Facebook group like
Mm,
yours and talk about it until you're starting to heal that and get that resentment over with? Because the the way you heal a resentment is finding your part. Because if you can find the smallest part you played in that
mm.
resentment, it will shift the story and build empathy.
Hmm. I've never heard that. That's interesting.
Yeah, well,
Huh.
you could tell me the story of how she was terrible, right?
Right. Sure.
And you could tell me the story of how she hurt you, and this was your part too.
Mm.
How you tell that story is going to majorly impact how you feel emotionally about that situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think story is everything. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
but I learned that from, Brene Brown, Rising Strong, fantastic book, highly recommend it. It's everything. So it's not only, sort of looking at yourself in terms of how you're feeling, but what are you telling yourself about what you're feeling, I guess, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah. Oh
Because if
man.
you paint your partner out as the demon during your divorce, it's like, you know what? That's not helping you.
Yeah.
Part of my goal is amicable divorce,
Yeah.
showing people that, you know what, you're not married anymore. So at this point, the goal changes to how can you coexist and co-parent effectively? Because the more you have goodwill with your ex, the easier it's going to
Mm,
be to parent your kids, to say, hey, at the last minute, can you take them because I
yeah.
have something going? And maybe I give you that same flexibility, because you can have an amicable divorce. It just takes one person to set the tone. That's another topic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we could go down that rabbit hole for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it sometimes frustrates me when I hear of this type of advice. Not because it's wrong or anything of that nature. It sometimes
Mm-hmm.
feels like we have to put in all of this work, and we
Uh-huh.
do. It's necessary after.
We do.
But boy, if we just would have, and I think both parties, if we just would have done that work before, we wouldn't be
I know.
having this conversation. It's just, and it's very
I
sad,
know.
and seems very unnecessary. And I don't know. I could go down a rabbit hole with this topic because I've really been thinking about it a lot lately. Because I'm going to be interviewing someone who's soon who I wouldn't say they're pro divorce, but kind of. And
Uh-huh.
I understand
Okay.
why because
Mm-hmm.
but divorce is hard, and so I
Mm-hmm.
think if you get to a point where you're like you want to move on, sometimes it takes sort of I don't know if being excited is the right sort of way to describe it, but you have to look at it in a positive light,
Mm-hmm.
which is again understandable, right? You want to be able to say yes, this was a good thing because of look at me now, X, Y, and Z or whatever. Like I'm,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
that to someone who's just starting out who doesn't want it, that is like a
Right.
dagger in the heart.
Right.
And I'm always sort of thinking about that
Right.
guy more than I am, the person that's further along because that guy who's in the depths of it is more likely
Right.
to commit suicide than the person that's further along. So anyway,
Right. Well, that's why that support is so key. But what we do when we're in that amount of pain is going to either make or break that relationship. So if we're so hurt and so feeling like the victim, and we retaliate and we talk bad about her and da 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 da, then we're setting up that adversarial relationship that's going to last for years.
Yeah.
So that's why, groups like yours are so
Yeah.
important, because if you can get that support, especially that first year, it's super important. Because then, I tell people, if you're newly divorced, act as if, be
Mm.
light and polite,
Mm.
avoid the hot topics. There's no use in doing it anymore because you're not married, and try to be polite.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. It's taken me a lot longer than
It's
one
just
year
not
to
easy.
get that. No, gosh, no, it's not easy. Because,
Yeah.
and again, I'm a man, so it's my point of view, but I think it's so much harder for men, if they didn't choose it. I don't know any other scenario.
Yes.
I
I
know
get
mine
it. Yep.
because I don't know what to do with all that emotion and that pain and that hurt, and it's like, don't be angry, don't be sad, get over it, move on, and it's just. And I know you're not saying that exactly, but as men, we hear that a
No.
lot. We hear that, man up, don't be a pussy, stop your whining, quit your bitching, move on.
Uh-huh.
It's all those things that are very
Yeah.
unhealthy, quite frankly. But
Right.
it's
Right.
it's it's very hard. Um,
Yeah.
the
Well, you're
the
talking about letting yourself go through the grieving process.
Yeah, and I think I fought it every step of the way. I think sometimes I still do. In some ways, I still
Mm-hmm.
go. I can't. It's been almost 5 years, and there's some
Mm-hmm.
days where I go. Especially if we do have a good interaction, and it's just like, why are we divorced? Like,
Yeah.
I don't. I'm so confused. But I don't stay there because it's not healthy for me. But
Mm-hmm.
um, in terms of we'll shift back to anger a little bit. In terms of people that have been
Yeah.
successful, specifically men, but anybody. In terms
Mm-hmm.
of people that have been successful, what are the things that they did or do in your program,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, or
Yeah.
to get to a good outcome? Like, what are the things that they can hone in on?
So they're willing to be accountable. Even though honestly, most of them come initially because their partner's making them come. That's
Mm.
okay. Because in the phone call, I still hear that little seed of, yeah, I'm angry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've overstepped. So being accountable is huge, 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 huge. The people who fly out of my class and do well, they're all accountable. They're like, and they're not shaming themselves for their anger. It's not like,
Mm.
I'm never going to be angry again. It's,
Right.
yeah, I'm going to be angry again, but now I know how to catch it early. Now
Right.
I have some tools that if I'm angry, I'm not going to stay in that conversation and let myself explode. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to watch my thinking and notice those triggers that I tell myself. Like if I tell myself, my kid's a brat, whoa, that's going to send me up
Mm.
versus, you know what? The kid's being a kid and
Yeah.
I need to go.
Mm.
That's different, but that's the kind of stuff that they leave with. And that's why they're successful, because they're just little tweaks. The good news about anger management is it doesn't take long. That's why my class is only 4 weeks,
Huh.
because you can get in and you can get out.
Hmm. I guess I'm surprised that it 4 weeks. That seems short.
It is short to learn the skills. Now, I will say that the people who likely never come back and are successful have another form of support
Mm.
continuing.
Yeah.
If you come into the work and you don't have a therapist, you don't have a group, you don't have
Right.
anyone to talk to in your life, you don't have any personal growth skills, then you will eventually go back to the way you were.
Yeah.
But most of the people that come to my class are pretty, they have some form of a men's group or a 12-step program or
Right.
therapy that makes it easier for them to continue the work.
Yeah.
But
I
the
mean,
skills itself are easy.
really. I mean,
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, it makes sense. I think what is that? You're the five people you surround yourself with, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That they reflect you, or whatever that saying is. But it's so it makes sense. You have to have sort of a community around you.
Yes.
Do you find that? I mean, because you have a Zoom class, it sounds like, do people find connections through that? Do you find a lot of people that don't have that support and that they get it through
Yes.
that?
Yeah, initially they'll come often and they'll say, "Oh my God, it's so nice to be with other people." So now they have a template that, you know what, I recommend a 12-step program. I recommend finding a group, because now they see the value. Now they see how easy it is to go, wow, I'm talking about my anger and everybody's nodding their head and I'm not the leper,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's the aha, like you're not alone. So I mean, I think my class tends to be an introduction to some people who have not seen the value of support.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't say enough about finding your
Oh,
tribe, finding
yeah.
your people, your community.
Yep.
It's I think it's easier nowadays in some ways. At least you can do it, through the internet. But I think
Yeah.
person to person connection feels much harder to achieve for some strange reason. I mean, I'm a
Yeah.
46-year-old man, and it feels, I have some friends,
Hmm.
but it does feel harder to sort of make friends as an adult for some reason. I mean, I guess we just don't have the same opportunities, especially myself. I work from home and travel, so I'm
Sure.
solitary a lot of the time. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, I mean, I think it's important whether it be. I think in person is probably better if you can find that. But I think
Hmm.
any kind of community you can lean on
Yeah,
is definitely important.
absolutely.
Um, is this something that you kind of mentioned it a little bit? You touched on it. Is this something that you got into these two types of things because they are
Hmm.
personal to you?
Oh, yeah. I grew up with someone who raged, and I, as a result, decided not to have my anger. Thank you very much.
Mm,
Until it started leaking out. And then I realized, okay, I'm actually not any healthier by stuffing it, because when it did leak out, it was mean comments that wasn't good. So it made me realize that, passive aggressive anger can be just as destructive as overt anger.
yeah. So I mean, I couldn't agree with that anymore. I think I've displayed both in my life.
Hmm.
Let's try and get a little specific in terms of I'm angry,
Uh-huh.
maybe almost raging, maybe it's a road rage incident, maybe that's happened.
Hmm.
Where I'm super angry. What do I do? What are the things that I mean, I'm sure there's work beforehand, but what are
Yeah.
the things, what are the steps to sort of get me to come down off that ledge, so to speak? Or maybe even it's my ex, she did something
Hmm.
and how do
Yeah.
I what is the first thing I need to do in order to start sort of calming down, I guess?
If you're already enraged, you need to leave.
Mm,
You cannot stay in the room. You cannot stay in that conversation. You literally have to get your butt out,
mm,
because you're toxic at that point.
yeah.
And there's no control left. If you're at that 3, 4 and you're noticing, yeah, I'm angry, but I'm still in control, then you could try to express it and say, I'm really upset right now
Mm,
with what you just told
yeah.
me. I just need to let you know that. And then see if the conversation can go anywhere. But if you climb above that 5, you are going into that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn
Mm-hmm.
reaction.
Yeah.
And your hormones are raging
Yeah.
and the cortisol is pumping through your
Yeah.
body. And that is not the time to stay and talk.
Yeah.
So it really is about identifying it early, because like you said, even if you're like enraged, you said something earlier about sometimes you just have a lot of stresses going on. So you have
Right.
that buildup of several things, and then all of a sudden it just takes one thing and boom, you're like a 9, 10.
How do you do that though? How do you start recognizing where you're, I guess, is it just a matter of being I guess I say it all the time, being mindful of where you're at? Is that kind of what it
Well,
is?
you could write down, okay, what are the things that are stressing you out?
Hmm.
And literally write them down. And in the morning, give yourself a number. What number are you? Are you a
Mm,
5? And it's only 8 in the morning? That's not a good sign.
yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Or
Yeah.
is it when you get home from work and you have to deal with your kids and now you're a
Mm,
5?
yeah.
And then the house is dirty, now you're an 8,
Yeah.
right? So it's like we all have to get to know what those triggers are. What are those little annoyances that end up creeping in? Because if you know them, then you're going to be able to manage them more effectively, and maybe even put in some self-care during the day. Like some people when I used to do couples work, I'd tell the man, if he was really not wanting to come home, sit in your car for 10 minutes, listen to your favorite song, like do something to calm down before you head into your house. So there's little things you can do, but you have to figure out what that is for you, because
Do
that's
you
highly individual.
Yeah. Do you also coach or teach the spouses? In other words, someone comes to you,
Sometimes.
they're really angry. and you want to tell the spouse, we sympathize, we understand, yes, and we're working on that,
Mhm.
but here's what you can do to help. Does that conversation happen, and is that a part of it?
Yeah, often when I have couples, I would recommend both of them
Mm,
going because then they have the common language, then they can support each other in the tools because when one person takes it and the other one doesn't, it it gives the message that the one person's the problem, but the other
mm,
person isn't. And let's face it, when we have couples issues, usually anger is an issue for both people,
yeah,
not
yeah,
just one.
yeah. I would think it would take two to solve it. I mean, it would speak. I would think it speaks to larger problems than just just
Yeah,
do
it's just
just
one person may look better than the other on the
yeah,
outside.
yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. Well, I really want to thank you for doing this. It seems like we just started like 5 minutes ago, but it's already been almost 40 minutes. So we'll start with we'll wrap up here, but first I'm gonna start with, how can people find you? What's the best way to get in touch with you and find out about all that you're doing?
So my website is counselingrecovery.com, and I have a pretty active YouTube channel that I think my handle is Michelle Farris MFT. And I have a free email course on anger, plus lots of other free resources. And I have an online version on demand of calming anger, and then my 4-week class. So there's lots on my website they can check out.
Awesome. The last question I ask everybody is, what words of wisdom would you impart to a man who is just beginning his divorce journey?
I would say be gentle with yourself. This is a rough process and it's not going to look pretty, but get as much support as you possibly can because you deserve it.
Excellent. I really appreciate you. That fantastic answer. Thank you so much for doing this. Hopefully we can have you back and dive into some of these other topics as well.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for watching and or listening. Since my separation in July of 2019, I have done an incredible amount of work on myself. I've had many different therapists, life coaches, and went through different programs. I've taken all that I've learned and put it into my own program called Forged by Fire. If you are interested in having me help you navigate your divorce, please hit my website, risingphoenixdivorcecoach.com. I look forward to working with you.